Hello there, my name is Adam Ball, and it's recently been made aware to me that I might not have much longer left here. So one of the things I want to do is try and perform a duty of giving something back to other people, as to what I have learned on my time on this planet. Now, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there about enlightenment, and perhaps you're one of those people that have watched them, and for whatever reason, things are not actually going well for you, you're not obtaining higher consciousness or enlightenment. Perhaps, in fact, you are finding it actually quite depressing or anxiety-making, and that's why today I'm going to be talking about something called Zen Sickness. I find personally that one of the best ways to look at how something goes right is to understand the things to avoid, or rather the things that can go wrong. As you may know, Buddhism and Zen in general advocates to neither be averse to something or to desire it. So neither right nor wrong, neither to pursue or to flee from. And these are very important principles, and they're actually the core principles of how Zen Sickness is formed, a very misunderstood and unknown disease of human consciousness. In order to understand some of these properties, we need to look at human consciousness as a transmissible disease, or rather transmissible insight. And as these insights are passed around, some are retained and some are lost. So let's draw in here. This is the mind. We call it the internal state. And what can happen in a very deep state of meditation, let's call it the surrounding consciousness. That's what I like to call it. The surrounding consciousness, which pervades all of the universe, is something that enters into us through our eyes and our ears. And this is something in quantum physics called causality, as in you have a cause and you have an effect. One of the principles of Buddhism is to eliminate the cause and conditions. If they can be eliminated, then the effects can be eliminated. But in the case of Zen Sickness, something very wrong can happen. If we eliminate all of the causes and conditions, the mind's internal state is effectively eliminated. When we remove all of the cause and conditions for who we are, what is left? Form consciousness. What is that? Well, it's the arising and falling of personalities, or insights, or ideas. And what can happen in Zen Sickness is, when the causes and conditions are eliminated, the mind is effectively open, entirely open to every single thing that comes inside of it. It is like a sponge or a mirror, depending on whether they are held onto or dispersed. Now, when you reach these higher states of consciousness, you lose your personality. And what can happen is, when you lose your personality, the mind will suddenly realize that something is going on. And it'll start to see things almost like if you look into the clouds and you look at the cloud, you can see something that looks like a boat or a river or a city even. In the higher states of consciousness, you will see a lot of things, and it's very important to understand that they are uncertain. They're uncertain things, so when you have an idea, there's always causes and conditions, right? That feed into that idea. This isn't a new principle to us, but when ideas can be created by an entirely empty mind, what does that mean? Well, it means that the entire mind is available for observation. And for example, you're not the same person that you were last week or a few minutes ago or a few seconds ago, and you won't be the same person in a few seconds. And this is something that we can prove by looking at our own lives. Most people can see that they changed as they grew older, as they grew more wiser, or perhaps in some people's cases less wise. And the point is that we're constantly changing all of the time, and so we're constantly changing all of the time. What can go wrong when we're changing all of the time? Well, we could get an idea that is wrong, right? What happens when we get an idea that's wrong? When we get an idea that's wrong, we think that we know. We always think that we know the answers. When we get these ideas, we think that we know something. Have you ever noticed when someone's telling you something that you already know, you don't listen to it? Why don't you listen to it? Well, because you don't want to waste your time listening to it, right? I know about this already. I should do better things with my life and than waste my time listening to someone telling me this thing again. As if the second or third time that you were told it is not different. And obviously the problem with knowing is that you can't change. And the problem with these depersonalized higher consciousness states is they can lead you to think that you know. So in the case where things go very wrong, let me just clear my whiteboard. In a case where things can go very wrong, the consciousness, particularly in something called stream entry. So when you meditate very deeply, one loses the sense of their mind and their body, and they sort of become a non-observer almost. And so let's have a look at this. So the enlightened mind is here. This is the enlightened. It's potentially not the mind. Let's just say the enlightened state. And that's related to causes and conditions, right? So there's cause, conditions. So when you enter this enlightened state, you will observe things that you haven't seen before. For example, when you meditate and watch a TV program or a film or read a book, you'll find that it's almost as if the book has completely changed. But it's important to understand that your consciousness has changed. So when you remove or add causes and conditions, it results in an entirely new film. And what we begin to be led to think is that the new film is the only truth. The new film is the truth that has been revealed to us, and perhaps it is. That would be okay. But when we say, okay, I know the new film, I know it, I've seen it, and it is, we ignore the causes and conditions for the enlightened state and the causes and conditions for the new film. Like it doesn't matter anymore. Like we've got this brilliant idea that nobody else can see, and we want other people to see it. So that leads us to go to other people. So we try to go to the group or the collective consciousness, and often we will want the group to recognize our new film, and often the group consciousness has their own version of reality. So effectively what this means is we have over here the people that are right, and we have over here the people that are wrong. And there's a line that's drawn in between them. Does that strike you as the whole picture? Or does that strike you as an opinion? A wrong opinion and a right opinion? In Buddhism, it's suggested that there's no wrong opinion and there's no right opinion. These things are part of the same body. And actually, let's say there is no right or wrong. Let's say there's opinion 1 and opinion 2. Okay? And your opinion 1 and the enemy is opinion 2. Doesn't have to be the enemy. The point is, your opinion, someone else's opinion that is different. And what you will tend to say is you say, oh, I look at these people, look at those terrible people. They're doing these terrible things. How ignorant, how silly that they are. And perhaps you're right. Perhaps they are being ignorant. But when we state something that we like or dislike, we're not stating just something about them, because it's something that we like or dislike. It's something that opinion 1 likes or dislikes. So opinion 1 is a very opinionated person, quite an arrogant person perhaps, and because they are so concerned with their new film, their new idea, they don't pay much attention to their own opinion. They're more concerned that the other person has a different opinion and they want to change it. And this is where the suffering begins. And for example, have you ever noticed that very arrogant people, they're not very aware of perhaps the way that they present themselves, perhaps in a way that really is quite destructive to the propagation of their idea, which leads the people with opinion 2 to think, well, it's probably not very enlightened then, probably it's not very wise or correct, because the emphasis is put on the other person, but you can't have an opinion on the other person without it being something that you like or dislike, something that you're averse or attracted to. So the arrogant person does not realize that all of the things he says about other people are saying things about himself or herself or their self. And it's a very unsatisfactory condition because it causes a lot of suffering. In particular to Zen sickness, these concepts are very important to understand, because Zen sickness is the person that knows. And the person that knows can't change. The person that knows doesn't need to change because they think that they know. So it's not the knowing that's the problem, it's the thinking associated with the knowledge. Knowing and knowledge should be separated in the consciousness to a certain extent, at least to prevent a definition that is self-referential. Of course, when you only rely on yourself, when you are not thinking clearly, that is a very undesirable condition, and people that suffer with Zen sickness will be very familiar with it, and they will find it is very difficult to listen to someone talking about Dhamma without an angry person arising, and the angry person knows already. And the problem is that it reaches a point where the consciousness of the person with opinion 1 isn't able to identify that his apparent views of the other person, let's say you're watching a spiritual video with some monks, he doesn't realize that his view of the other person is a view of himself. And this is something that you shouldn't skip over. Think about what that really means. What does that mean? It means that if we get too many ideas feeding into our opinion, and if they interact too much with each other, this is a very unhealthy state, and it will result in thoughts like, they don't listen to me, or they're all wrong, none of them are good people, the world is a terrible place, and I call those people the Buddhas that missed, because there isn't actually anything wrong with them achieving the higher consciousness, but they get Zen sickness because they know the new film is real. And what happens is there's a part of the brain, like a grammatical part of the brain, and it connects things together. So let's say, these are completely arbitrary, okay? I'm just making up some connections to describe it to you. Because the people that suffer from Zen sickness find this kind of discussion very unsettling. It's not well documented. So let's say there's a JCB outside your house, right? So you've got JCB outside your house. That's a work construction vehicle, right? And you might think, well, my name's Jamie. Your name might be Jamie, for example. And you might say ICB. ICB. And this is a kind of deconstructive grammar of lower consciousness. The higher consciousness states depend on and create these connections. If you consider that each one of these circles is a set of neurons, and every time you see a new film in the enlightened state, because you're in an enlightened state, you're able to see a lot more. So something called stream entry happens in the very deep states of meditation, And once you've reached into stream entry, you'll find that you're able to make a lot of connections that you weren't before. And the problem with this is not all of them will be correct. In fact, probably none of them. Which is why a lot of the arahats, the so-called enlightened beings, would continuously say, not real. All perception is a fiction, an incomplete, or rather every definition of a perception is incomplete. The problem in itself isn't caused by seeing the new film. It's caused by the behavior and insights that happen after seeing it, and that's where this grammatical part of the brain comes from. It's you could call it a kind of thesaurus, where things that you would not have linked before are linkable, and it can abstract very, very far because the mind is empty, so the whole consciousness state is ready and available to assimilate this information. And what happens if you're one of these people that suffers from Zen sickness? You become so overwhelmed by it, and because you know you're not able to change the causes and conditions that overwhelm you, you simply say, oh my God, I've woken up into the demon realm, I'm in hell, and I can't stop myself from seeing all of these new things because I believe that I know them. Do you see? I can't stop seeing all of these horrific things about humanity and society because I've seen them and I know about them and I've connected them, and I'm not going to change those neurons connections because I don't need to, because I know it's there. For example, in mental illness, in mental illness, I forgot what I was saying now. 1 second, let me just clean this. Yeah, for example, in mental illness, it's not all bad. There's plenty of people that are very mad, very sick, let's say. They have a type of Zen sickness. All madness is a form of Zen sickness. But some of these mad people are very happy. They're in a state of bliss, and it actually makes them quite vulnerable. For example, they might think that they're in a relationship with, some celebrity, and when they watch a film or something, they might feel like they're being personally chauffeured by this person. And this reveals something in Buddhism that we call equanimity. It reveals something that we call equanimity, in that every single person is trying their best. If you really think about that, if you deeply think about that, there isn't a criminal that exists, not in the way in which that we think. So I'm not going to say what the criminal has done, but here we have a criminal. This is a criminal, as Western society defines them anyway. This criminal is a very bad person, okay? And this is the society. These are people, and they all look at the criminal and they say, oh, terrible person, can't believe that they would do that. And they tend to say things like, they're gonna get beaten up in jail, or they're gonna, they've done something really horrific, I hope something horrific happens to them. And by doing that, they've become a criminal. They've become a criminal. So the criminal does very bad things, right? That's their definition, not mine. Very bad things, okay? And the criminal has infected the society, because when the people in the society see the criminal, they want to do very bad things to them. So if we were to remove the labels, we wouldn't see much of a difference in terms of the desire. This criminal desires to do very bad things to someone, okay? And these good people, these upstanding members of society are outraged, absolutely livid. How could a person do this? They're not doing their best. And what the court will do is the court will say, right, here's a scale of normal, sane. Let's say 0 is normal and 10 is bonkers, right? I'm going to use the word unconscious. Unconscious. Their best is a very unconscious effort, right? Because the good people over here would never do something that these people would do, because these people are supposedly conscious, right? So the people that are conscious would never do what these unconscious people do. And actually, if these people over here, these bonkers people, became conscious of what they did, they become rehabilitated, right? This is the concept of Western criminology, and the court says, well, where does the criminal land? The criminal lands here, so we're going to punish him much more. Big punishment. 50 years. Okay? He's incarcerated in prison. Right? But the guy who's completely bonkers, completely unconscious, he doesn't go to prison, he goes to the mental asylum, right? He gets psychiatric care, because it's not his fault, right? And it's something that happened to them. I propose to you that only criminals happen here. Because if a person's conscious and aware of what they do, and that's the best they can do, they're very aware, they would never be led to do it. But these people have had a different experience in life. They're not conscious. These people have a completely different film. This is film 2. This is film 1. And imagine if film 1 doesn't understand film 2. Imagine if film 2 doesn't understand film 1. The criminals resent them, right? Because the criminals know they're doing their best. They're just unconscious. So what I'm saying here is that crime, unwholesome view, sin, or whatever you call it, this only happens when people aren't aware of God, aren't aware of the repercussions to themselves. Okay? So the way that the Western court system is deciding things is really broken, because they're trying to find out if a person is really evil or not, right? So the people who commit murder over here, they're very evil, right? And they should be punished a lot more. And the people over here are mad, right? Now I propose that that is wrong. There are no such thing as evil or mad people. There are people that are misguided, that commit crime. I propose to you that crime can't be committed by someone consciously. And I know what the argument is. They say, well, They know what they're doing, right? But if these people did it, they would know what they were doing, right? No, you can't do that. You can't kill someone or hurt someone without knowing what you're doing. If you're sane, right? And the sane person would never kill someone, right? Because they're sane. They're not. And they say, "Oh, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Let me start again." So this shows that even my own mind, everyone's mind, is vulnerable to this. As soon as we start to define things, we start to really make a lot of assumptions, right? We say that the people that are normal can commit crime if they're evil, and we say that the people that are mad, they're not really evil or committing a crime, they're disturbed. But I propose to you that all sane people, even if they pass these sanity tests, like they're shown to be sane after the crime, it's not reliable to think that a person could possibly be normal under these circumstances. I'm saying that evil, that is abnormal. Okay? So if evil is abnormal, it never happens to sane people. It never happens to the wholesome people. These people are restrained. Right? In Buddhism, restrainment is very important. Now, it sounds like you're holding someone down, doesn't it? But it's not really like that. What it means is that you're not introducing an effect. When something happens to you, let's say there's a cause and condition, say you lose your house or your girlfriend or something that really matters to you. A lot of us have gone through these things. A restrained consciousness is not injured. Let's say desire, sexual desire or something like that. If it's unrestrained, okay? So say you're a sane person, you're completely sane, but then suddenly you become insane. I don't know, say you go to a party or something and someone hands you a cigarette and you have some kind of mental breakdown. What happens is there's a cause and condition that makes you become an unrestrained consciousness, and it's this unrestrained consciousness that is led to do these evil things that we call evil. And what I propose to you is that evil things cannot be performed by the restrained mind. Addiction, sexual addiction, drug addiction, cannot occur in a restrained mind. But what happens is, say the restrained mind takes some drug or has some sex, and it becomes a habit or a routine, and then it can become unrestrained. And what happens in this very unwholesome, unrestrained state is that physical damage occurs, first of all. This is very easy to understand, right? If you are unrestrained in the movement of your body, if you do not take care, you will damage yourself, right? And it's quite interesting because we actually have a kind of feedback cycle here, and sorry, I should actually point there. You are a restrained normal person. Some cause and condition, it might be chemical cause, it might be a psychological cause, it might just be something that happens to you when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Whatever it is, it makes you become unrestrained. Say you've experienced some kind of trauma, maybe you've witnessed a crime, witnessing a crime. So you're a normal person, completely sane, completely conscious, There's a problem with that definition, but let's just say you're a very normal person and you witness something like a crime, or a crime is done to you. And what that actually does is it can cause you to become quite unrestrained. And that's where the physical and psychological damage occurs. But it's important to understand that psychological damage is physical, because the psychological components of your body, of your brain, are physical, right? But in the medical colleges, there's a discrimination made between this physical and psychological. But actually, when the chemists start to look very deeply into the body and the mind and the way in which its subtle hormonal brain chemistry works, they discovered that there is actually these physical processes in the brain that transport things that are associated with new behavior. So to get over here and become a criminal, first we have to be exposed to something. And so I'm losing my track here. So when we become exposed, we become unrestrained. It's just this lack of restrainment that causes us to become maddened, irritated, if you like. Imagine you're doing something that you've always done, and then you get a call or there's a loud bang, and it really pisses you off, right? There's a loud noise in the background. Well, people with this Zen sickness, they know all about that. It's a disease of the ear. It's a disease of the vagus nerve, vagus nerve. It's a disease of, what else is it a disease of? I suppose it's also a disease of the heart. It's a disease of the kidneys. And people with Zen sickness, they know all about this serious pain they get in their kidneys. They know about the serious pain they get in the side of their face. And importantly, it's a disease of the eye. What you'll find is that people in higher states of consciousness, their eye doesn't behave normally anymore, or what you would consider normal. The eye effectively, the muscles in the eye move differently when you reach into these higher states of consciousness, because the causes and conditions, psychological, physiological conditions, are altered. The hormonal patterns of the body are altered in the deep, very deep meditative states, and what can happen is you can get this terrible affliction in your ear. It's a terrible affliction to have, and I've had it. It's I would describe it as a feeling as if something has crawled into your ear and it cannot be unblocked no matter what you do. And it actually seems like the ear, every time I was exposed to something frightening or unsatisfactory, and let me tell you, that's most things, I would get this horrific pain in my ear. And the horrific pain would become so bad that I'd feel even worse. And when I felt even worse, when I listened to even some simple video on YouTube or something like that, my ear hurt even more, because every time my ear hurt, I would feel bad. And the more bad I felt, the more my ear would hurt. So Zen sickness can be characterized as a recursive psychophysiological disorder of the muscles And I'm going to explain how this works, since no medical textbook can understand or document it, but the logic is fairly simple. So here we have your ear, not made very well, and here we have your mind, and here we have stressor. In medical science, they call these stressors. I think that an observation or sense observation. What happens is the mind is here. So have you ever noticed when something happens, your mind views it. This is you viewing it. Your mind reacts to it, and this is almost involuntary. Or let's say there's a certain tolerance point. If we're not completely restrained, we will. If something happens, we tense up, and it's our back, it's our neck, it's our shoulders, it's even our kidneys, our heart, even the vessels in our brain and the hormones. It goes crazy, right? So these stresses come in. And what happens is, there's this little vibration that's sent. Here's the vagus nerve. That's the vagus nerve. And here's the ear. A little vibration is sent to the ear, and inside the ear are these little muscles. Okay? And every time stressor comes, you get a little whoop. It doesn't matter if you're having sex, or if you're watching the sunset, or if I don't know, something traumatic happens. It doesn't matter which one it is. These little vibrations, and there'll be certain vibrations in the muscles which are very pleasurable. They're not in a cycle or anything. They come and they go. But in the case of Zen Sickness, the stressors, which we'll call observations, they come into the unrestrained mind. Because this only happens to unrestrained people. Once the mind is unrestrained, the stresses will create a very destructive impulse into the muscle inside of your ear. And what that will result in is exercise. It's exercising the muscle, and what will happen is the muscle will become bigger. It's a bit like working out. You go to the gym, no problem understanding that. If you're going to the gym all the time, you're lifting weights, you expect the muscle to get bigger, right? But in the case of the nerves just around here and the eye, they're very sensitive, and they're very delicate. You know, sense of hearing and your eyesight are very delicate. But with Zen Sickness, you can't even see. And the main reason why you can't see properly, and it goes blurry and all of this, there's distortions. The distortions are being caused by this. And it's because this has lost control of that. And it's lost control of that. So what happens in a person with Zen Sickness, the stressor comes in, stresses the mind, makes the muscle bigger. So when another stressor, and a second stressor comes in, this is much bigger and it's much more intense. So what happens is, this muscle, once it grows, once it deforms, this muscle becomes a muscle stressor, right? And the muscle stressor is unrestrained, and it becomes a reflex. Okay, and the pain is so severe that the mind doesn't want anything to do with it. The mind wants to avoid that because it knows that will happen. And every person that is mentally ill is experiencing this. But medical science doesn't understand it, because there's not many people that have had schizophrenia or serious illness that actually can come back. Most of them are lost because nobody knows how it works. They know it's a complicated thing, and they've got words like complex psychological disorder. They know it's complex because if it wasn't, they'd have figured it out and provided some medication that completely reverses it. But all they can do is manage this. That's all they can do. They can give you drugs that will make this ear muscle relax, and the ear muscle might actually start to get smaller. The muscles in the very, very fine muscles, very far beyond what is considered understood medical science. So there are certain medications for illnesses that you can take that will help with this, but it's important to understand that the cause is not exactly chemical. The cause is not exactly psychological, and it's not exactly physiological, because you have the chemical, the psychological, and the physiological. They're all, this is a system. Stressor, stress mind, muscle reflex in the ear, muscle and nerve growth. More nerve growth becomes a stressor, an unstrained reflex, which then disturbs the mind, and the mind goes, ugh. So what can happen is, maybe just one stressor can make the mind enter into this cycle. And people with Zen sickness, they're very aware of what's going on. They don't know what to do, and they think that it's the mind that's causing it. Sometimes they think it's the stressor that's causing it, and sometimes, like in the medical sciences, they go, it's the muscle. But there's an important takeaway here, which is very simple. The size of the muscle determines how much it hurts. How much it hurts depends on how much the mind can become unsettled. And that's the way that the feedback loop of this works. I want to cover this properly, because it's very, very important. And nobody has spoken about it ever that can find anyway. They're all encouraging people to reach the higher states of consciousness, right? But this is a disease of higher consciousness. This doesn't happen if you're a very ignorant person. If you're completely ignorant, these stressors go in one ear and come out the other. But if you become highly enlightened and you gain massive amounts of new ideas, new films, it's like watching a film as an adult kind of thing. You watch the film as a child and you think, oh shit, I didn't get that joke. What's changed? Chemistry has changed, your psychology has changed, your body has changed. But most people, they don't really think much about it. They just go, oh, that's funny, that's kind of weird. And most people, they don't suffer any negative effects from that. But people that have become enlightened might find that they can't watch TV. In particular, they might not be able to listen to the radio. It'd be too unsettling to think that yourself is talking to yourself. And in quantum physics, there's actually a concept. I think that this relates to quantum physics, okay? In quantum physics, there's this concept that if you have an observer here, so this is an eye, and he looks at something, let's say it's a particle of light. When he looks at it, the spin is changed in the particle, which means that he has a spin as well. And what happens is, in higher consciousness, this spin is seen, and this spin is seen, and a third spin is made. You see? It's you have cause and effect, right? In relativistic motion, you know there's a cause and effect. But what happens if you can see the cause and you can see the effect? You say, right, well that's an uncollapsed waveform, right? Uncollapsed waveform in quantum physics. So you've got your uncollapsed waveform. What would happen if that becomes knowledge? Well, the mind would create a matrices for it, right? Some kind of logical pattern or structure. it's just for illustration purposes. This isn't an official scientific lesson, but it's important to understand in an enlightened being, the consciousness is reacting to its awareness. It's reacting to the consciousness becomes aware of how its spin, its flow, its form is influencing this. Yeah? And obviously if the mind becomes aware that its form is influencing what is stressful to it, there's a condition where the things that it found enjoyable before will become unenjoyable. And it's not because these stressors have changed in any way, or that their new kind of film to insight is correct or not. It's more that because they're looking, that they know about it. They were much happier when they were innocent children until someone come along and told them that it was wrong, right? And if people depend on certain stressors, good stressors, and these stressors become bad, the mind, the enlightened, higher consciousness mind, knowing that it is having an effect on how these things are affecting it, it can become completely overwhelming, and it will actually create desire of the mind to try and change the result here because it knows that it can influence it. Now I know it sounds ridiculous that Zen monks could sit in an audience and play games with people's minds and control them, but it's quite well documented that mad people believe they can do this. And based on at least this example of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, it's not entirely improbable. Let's leave it at that. I don't need to prove this to you. I've witnessed it. But you need to witness it for yourself, right? In order for it to be valid. And what's interesting about this is, I don't need some other scientist, and you don't need some other scientist or doctor to tell you. This can be seen, and this knowledge is very dangerous because it can result in this. You have the stressor, the mind reacts badly to it. Perhaps the mind knows all about how the stressor is affecting its ear, but it doesn't really know what to do. It's affecting its vision. It knows that before it became enlightened, it could look at the Zen master dead in the eye, but after it became enlightened, can't look at the Zen master in the eye anymore. What's happening? Well, before it was a lot easier, right? It was a lot easier because you weren't aware of this quantum thing. You weren't aware that your entangled state is changing things. But could you imagine if you're quite a high stress person, or if you start to worry about this, it's going to be murder for you. Because as soon as you start worrying, the mind wants to do something about it, right? All the people that have Zen sickness, they want to do something about it. You don't find many people with Zen sickness that have given up. They've been trying to get it under control forever. I mean, I'm autistic. I can certainly relate to this. And I've certainly had these experiences where the stressor affects my mind, and the mind makes the nerve irritable. And the irritable nerve upsets the mind enough for the next stressor to make it worse. And you have, in the end, you've effectively trained your mind by trying to interact with this positively or negatively, trying to influence the result, is effectively bringing bad results. Not trying to influence the result, not being restrained, is going to cause bad results. So you say, "Oh, Adam, thanks a lot. You're basically saying me not to do anything. You're saying don't try and control it. Don't not try and control it," right? And that is what I'm saying. Because if this quantum mechanical thing is at work, trying to control it can bring bad consequences, because trying to control it will cause a collapse of the wave function, and it will cause these nerves to vibrate. When the wave function collapses, you're going to end up with particles, right? And you know, when you don't restrain yourself and you have this kind of knowledge, you're also going to be subject to it. So you can't try and influence it, but you can't try to not influence it. You can't be ignorant, but you can't be malevolent or benevolent either. All of these states will always lead to an incomplete picture, and an incomplete picture will always lead to an unsettled mind that's looking at what is right or wrong, what is valid and what is invalid, what it knows and what it doesn't know. You can't change a person who knows, and the people that suffer from Zen sickness can't change because they already think that they know. So this is such a dangerous disease that it really does require the time that I've spent to discuss it. No one's discussing it. No one's discussing it at all because the medical science hasn't. There's no such thing as a psychophysiological recursive function of higher states of consciousness. They throw you out of medical school for suggesting it, but I certainly believe I've experienced something similar to this, and I feel it as my duty to tell you that if this has happened to you, it's not the end. It's not the beginning either. But if you were completely normal, and then, you know, perhaps you're a great meditator, and you're quite used to talking to the forest, and animals, you can hear them, right? A cat purrs, and you can hear words, or something like that. And you're completely normal, right? You're enlightened, so-called enlightened. But, so you can hear the animals, right? And I don't want to get too crazy about this because it's a secret. It's not discussed, and it's a secret for a reason, probably because the probability of Zen sickness is quite great. So this is a simple concept. Here we're going to have a tree. It's a tree, badly drawn tree, and here's its branches, and they branch off into these sub branches, right? And what happens with this tree is if the branches keep on splitting off like this, the tree starts to touch the ground, and the animals come along and they eat it, which is unfortunate for the tree. But the tree is okay. The tree can recover even if it loses a large amount of it. But this is a tree, right? And here we have, let's say, here we have the Buddha. Here we have the Buddha sitting underneath the tree, and to you it's just a tree, right? Perhaps you're not enlightened, perhaps you are. And you say, well, what caused the Buddha's enlightenment under the tree? Well, that's actually enough information to understand how the whole thing works. You see, when the consciousness is empty, when Buddha's mind is empty, this tree doesn't look like so much a tree. When the wind comes along, the wind, the tree starts to sway either side, right? And when the light comes through the tree, you get something that looks a bit like this. Okay. And when the enlightened consciousness looks upon the tree, it'll start to see things like this. Okay. you say, well, what is that? What is it that the Buddha is seeing? Why has he become enlightened under the tree? What was it about the tree? Well, it was neither the tree nor the Buddha. It was the two coming together. When the two come together, they are complete. Sorry, I need to take my shoes off. I've got cramp in my foot. Standing too long. 1 second. So these spirits of the forest is seen by the Buddha. This is called stream entry. This is where the enlightenment happens. And within those trees, on the most basic level, is film 1 and film 2. Okay? Film 2 is demons and spirits. Scary spirits. Okay? If you suffer, you know what I'm talking about. And over here we have deities. You might say that these are friendly spirits. Now remember what I was saying earlier. Now, you watch a film as a child and you love it. But then you watch it again as an adult and you don't love it so much, right? Or maybe the opposite way around. Maybe you watch a film as a kid and you think this is kind of shit, this is boring. And then you watch it as an adult and you're like, my mind is blown. So you've got film 1 and film 2, right? But you've also got interpretation 1 and interpretation 2. Now, interpretation 2 of film 2 is film 1. Is Nirvana. The second interpretation of film 2. I don't know, I'm looking at it, it seems to have changed. My consciousness is changing all of the time. So the chances of seeing interpretation 2 when you're in hell, very high. But if you know that it's definitely happening, very low. You're going to stay there. And it's important to know, because you probably don't know, which is why you're staying. Film 1, this is heaven. Interpretation 1 is heaven. Don't change it. Don't change it if you're in heaven. It's good, right? You want to be there. If you want, maybe you want to be in hell. Go there. But interpretation 1, heaven, totally fine. But if you start to doubt it, if you start to reinterpret it, if you become angry and unrestrained, what happens to people that are angry and unrestrained? Have you ever noticed when someone's angry, they're not really thinking very clearly. They're not looking at things in a sensible way, right? That's normal because they're overwhelmed. You ask them, they're very, very angry, very upset. And you might notice upset people, they do pretty crazy things. Yep, if they get angry when they're in heaven, they're looking at heaven and all of a sudden the trees that appeared to be beautiful are not, because they doubt it. And because they doubt it, they look for a different perception. So they interpret, they move. Their second interpretation of film 1 goes straight to hell. But the unchanging interpretation of film 1 stays in film 1. The unchanging interpretation in film 2, in hell, stays in film 2. So resisting change is the cause of Zen sickness. Resisting change. And believe it or not, promoting change can also create the conditions and causes. Because when we resist change, we want it. We want something. I like to resist. Yum. I like it. Take it away from me. I'm very sad because I want what I like. I don't want what I don't like. So by liking resisting change, we're saying I don't like promoting change. And by liking promoting change means we don't like resisting change. So when we resist change and we can't resist it, very unhappy situation, very angry. And when we promote change and we can't achieve the promotion of change, we're very unhappy, very sad. Because by liking it or disliking it, we're creating a condition. And as long as that condition is true, you'll be happy. But if the condition is not true anymore, if you fail to achieve either of these, it'd be very stressful. So you have, say, I don't want to upset people. I know this is very important to a lot of different people. Say here we have National Front. Yeah, National Front. The fascist mentality. Not my words. I love them. I think they're great. All of them. Everyone. And here, let's say, by the way, these are not contrasting things. I'm not saying one is left and one is right. But let's say we have LGBTQ. So over here, we've got a lot of people that are lesbian, bisexual, transsexual, queer, or whatever they say that their identity should be. So this is an identity, right? This is an identity. And National Front, people in the National Front, they're interested in looking after each other, their nation. But they don't like people that aren't for that, right? Something like that. Is that fair? It's just an example. It's not political speech. So this is an identity, right? It means a lot to me. I'm this person. It means a lot to me. I'm that person, right? These are two different identities. This one wants to promote change, right? And this one wants to promote change too. But this one may resist that one. And this one may resist that one. So here we have, so if we look at this, we have people over here, just for example, people over here that are for something, it doesn't matter what it is, and over here we have people that are against it. And the people that are for it, these are very happy people. Very happy people. And the people that are against it, they're very happy. And actually, they only become unhappy. This is provable. Look at all of the videos about these kind of things and apply this perception. People who are for it, they're very happy as they are. Whatever they're for, it doesn't matter which. And the people that are against it, they're very happy over here. And they will stay happy, both of them, both sets of people. But when they meet here, boom, boom. This is something, we use an example of groups of people, right? And you wouldn't think that that also applies into the mind. You know, have you ever said, oh, I'm kind of torn. I'm torn between these things. That's when part of your mind is saying, yeah, I'm for it. And another part of your mind is going, no, I'm against it. You see? Yep, I'm against. Yep, I'm for. Yes, I'm against. Yes, I'm for. There isn't a yes or a no. These are both yeses. You see? These guys are only no's to the people that are for when they meet. As long as they don't meet, they'll be totally fine. And that's it, really. There's a lot more to cover. I mean, this is just a few percent of it, but I thought to myself, it would be a shame to die without telling people how mental, psychological conditions were transmissible. And it's a horrifying idea, right? That you could watch I don't know, someone who is opinionated about a particular thing, that he could infect you with his idea. But normally what happens is people say, oh, well, I've discovered this great guy on YouTube. You've got to watch him. Or this great girl. Or some people say, I've discovered this great entity on YouTube. I can travel through time. You've got to believe me, it's happening. And that's kind of where all the trouble begins. It's as soon as we favour one thing or the other, there's a conflict. And what we don't realise is everything exists inside of you already, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see it. I guess what I'm trying to say is consciousness, higher consciousness, enlightened consciousness taught me something that is not well described anywhere that I've seen. It basically said to me, everything that you can see in the universe has to already exist for you to be able to see it inside of you, otherwise you wouldn't recognize it. And like this really, it's hard to get my mind around what that actually means. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that Buddhism is so far ahead of Western medical science that this could cure a lot of very ill people, and it's not acceptable that I will die before conveying that to other people, because it'll help them so much. It's it's really, it's difficult for me to conclude that cancer, eye cysts, and veritable other illnesses is completely avoidable, just because the mind is engaged in a certain way of thinking. You don't realize that 90% of pain, back pain, shoulder pain, is actually caused by the consciousness. We all know when we're at work, we curl our feet, or I don't know, maybe you don't curl your feet, maybe you do something else, but like, we know what stress is when it comes, but we never really think that. I mean, I think people know it. They know that if they become stressed, they'll become physically ill. But they don't really, they go to the chiropractic or they take tablets and they don't think much about it because they need to do that in order to continue working. So it's a very inconvenient fact to say, well, hold on a second, all of these things that are happening to me that I need these treatments for, I caused. That's too inconvenient in Western society. But all of this I've described, this is why the Tibetans don't come out. They go away and they stay there. They don't want to come back out. They retreat by majority. They don't want to involve themselves in, a lot of them don't want to involve themselves. And with the pitfalls that exist, I don't blame them, you know? And the Western people, you know, they don't want to accept any of this spiritual religious mumbo jumbo because it's very inconvenient. It works so much against the ideas of society that it would be much more convenient to say, well, these people are kind of, they're not really all there, and they're right. They're not there. They're not. There's not an individual identity to be concerned or unconcerned, and that is very uncomfortable for Westerners. Actually, you might have reached an enlightened state or a higher consciousness, and people say, "Don't stare at me like that. I don't like your eyes. Why don't you blink? It's weird. You weirdo." And they can actually, like I said, if you're unrestrained and you listen to these people when they say that to you, you're going to break yourself when you've already achieved it. You've achieved everything that you came here to achieve. You lost your personality. Don't try and get it back just because people can't accept you for it. That's really very important. Very important. And this has gone on for over an hour now. So what I will say is that the human imagination is infinite. And it has to be infinite, otherwise it can't discover anything. Really think about that, and really think about what the imagination, it can produce anything, that it can exist in the universe. It's occurred to me from very deep meditative experience, ones that caused Zen Sickness, I'm quite willing to admit, where it seems that I'm able to travel anywhere, and you say, well, it's all in your mind. I say, well, yeah. Doesn't change it though, because it'll be in my mind if I go there too, if I actually do it. It's just the same thing without having to travel. That's basically what the deeper states of higher consciousness are. So the next time you're in an unrestrained state and you're watching these videos and you can feel everything hurting and tensing up and getting worse, don't just think, oh, I'm going to have to suffer with this. This is how we reach enlightenment. It isn't. It's likely that you've already reached it, but you didn't notice because you were so wrapped up and concerned with it. And I call those people the Buddhas that missed. I think it's a really poignant statement, because the only difference between the Buddhas that missed and the people that become depressed and mentally ill is that the only difference between the enlightened and the people that miss enlightenment is that the people that miss are depressed and they're upset about the ignorance and hate in the world. They're really overwhelmed by it, but they're conscious of it. The depressed and mentally ill are very conscious of the way that people look at them, and they can see certain shades in people's faces. They can identify micro evil or micro unconsciousness, and it really frustrates and upsets them a great deal, because they want to change it. They know it's there, and the point is, knowing that it's there doesn't make you react badly or react positively. It's actually a choice. The depressed people chose to be depressed, and it's a lot of depressed people are not going to agree with me, but it's the depressed people and the mentally ill people that point out a lot of things in society that are unsatisfactory, and they're completely correct. They're very conscious and aware, and that's why they're depressed, because their awareness is so much bigger than other people. They can just see it, and because they feel so compelled to do something about it, it's like a big weight. But the Buddha, who becomes enlightened, sees it and goes, oh my God, I can see all of the flaws of people. No longer will I be plagued by them. But the depressed person just wants to convince the other people to be better, and that's never going to happen. Not all of them. Very unsatisfactory condition to see the meaning of life, to see to be so aware and conscious and to throw it all away just because you're unsatisfied with what everybody else has done. But the Buddha isn't unsatisfied. The Buddha is neither satisfied or unsatisfied. He sees all of the ignorance, and instead of taking that negatively, he says, oh, thank God, now I can not be a subject of that cause and effect. Because I can see exactly what they're doing to me. But the depressed person, they become very vulnerable because it matters what other people are doing to them, and as long as it matters, they'll always be depressed. They'll always be upset. So that really summarizes my talk. I must tell you, I'm not very good at talking, and like it's been really difficult to put this all together. I've just kind of improvised, and there wasn't any planning or anything. But there's so much more. Like, I just hope that I survive, that I live long enough to be able to tell you all, because well, you wouldn't believe the things that can be achieved with this knowledge. But its dangers are so severe that even the senior monks won't discuss it. And that's okay, but a lot of the people in the greatest need are not going to go to them to get support and receive their secret private knowledge. So it needs to be public, a little bit at least. Yeah, and there was something else that I wanted to say. I don't think I'm going to remember it. It's just there's too much. It's just too much to say and cover. Perhaps I'll be fortunate, and before I turn the camera off, it'll come back to me. Yeah, I don't think it's going to come back to me. So yeah, I hope you find that useful. Perhaps there'll be some more videos like this if people enjoy the content and what's been discussed. I will do my best to provide more videos. But if you've just heard this knowledge and it is new to you, please be very careful. Gaining the ability of a Superman has a lot of implied responsibility. Imagine achieving a state of consciousness where the mind can operate at thousands of times faster, really. Imagine even that higher consciousness state is not completely unprone to error. So it's like, if you can think about ideas 1,000 times faster, imagine what you could do to yourself with that. If thinking normally upsets you, think very carefully before performing a vipassana meditation that will allow you to effectively increase the efficiency of your consciousness by thousands and thousands of percent, maybe millions of percent. And that's why some people don't come back, because they can't find their way back. Too many ideas were stacked on top of each other, and the personality became too fixed. Gives you a good idea of what disorders like multiple personality disorder might actually be. It's just very high speed consciousness that has no restraint, I think. So the criminal, it doesn't exist. The criminal doesn't exist. The victim doesn't exist. It's not the victim's fault. It's not the criminal's fault either. Oh, but it must be the criminal's fault. Well, if we assume that everybody's not doing their best, what will we do? How will we act if we conclude that some people aren't trying their best? How will we treat them? I've remembered what I was going to say. So recently, I found myself in a situation where I had to ask the government for help because of a really financial situation that's unmanageable, untenable, And I explained like some of the difficulties that I've had, and just like I have to you, and they seemed very responsive and positive. Whereas I'd gone to them before when I was not very well, and they weren't positive or responsive at all. And I thought, wow, how fickle is the human mind that it only treats people well who are the gimmies, who are the good people. Ah, yes, he's a good person. He's clearly got his mind in the right place. He's a very productive member of society. He's just been unfortunate. And then, oh no, he's just a lunatic. He deserves it. We'll treat him differently. How fickle is the human mind that the people that need the help the most, the people that are truly struggling, they're not deserving, but the people that somehow recover like me, they are. It disgusts me, it really does. And when I think of that, I realize why depressed people exist, actually. Because you know what? You're right. But it doesn't help you being right. It doesn't help at all. So I hope that helps you, and perhaps you've experienced some of the things that I have. It's terribly upsetting, but if we act with the proper restraint, we can completely overcome all of these illnesses, because none of them really exist. Thank you.